Hello, Slicey Dicers. This is Brian with another knife video for you. Today, we have a review, yes, of this Hinderer XM-24 Vintage Series. It is an amazingly cool knife, and there will be a regular Slicey Dicey style tabletop review in a bit. If you want to click on the timestamp down below, I provided that to skip ahead to that part, or maybe I'll figure out that YouTube chapters thing and you can do that. But I really encourage you to stick around for the next however long this takes, because I named this knife. I don't do that often. It seems like all the knives I've named are my Hinderers. I don't know why that is, but this one, as soon as I picked it up, I knew who to name it after. I wasn't intending on getting a vintage. I actually just wanted a regular XM-24, but this came up on Nick Shabazz's Patreon, which I highly encourage you to go check out. And it was a wicked good deal. Thank you, everybody, I got a few people email me pointing it out. And yeah, so I have a vintage one. But as soon as I picked it up, I just knew who would love it. And I'm naming it after him. This knife is called Walt from here on out because it's named after this guy. This is Walter McGill, my grandfather, the toughest son of a bitch to ever walk the face of the earth in my eye. I mean, he was, always will be my hero. He passed away when I was 13, but the effect that he had on my life, I worshipped this guy. I mean, I remember as a little kid, I would follow him around so much. He lived next door to us that my parents put a fence up to try and keep me from following him around all the time. And yeah, I was like 4 or 5. It took me 2 minutes to figure out how to open up that fence. And my dad was quite upset about that. He spent a lot of money putting this fence in because my mom was worried because I was out wandering around with Grandpa all the time, and it was bothering Grandpa. And then my dad said, "How'd you get the fence open?" I said, "I watched you do it." So, but it didn't work out. Nothing could keep me from him. He lived right next door to us. And this picture was taken, by the way, in 1936. He was, I'm sorry, 1926. So he was 21 years old. He was born in 1905. And unfortunately passed away in 1988. But 6'3", bright red hair, as Irish as the day is long. It turns out I had a bit of an odd childhood. I didn't think so. I thought it was amazing. We ran around the woods, and climbed on trees and, shot guns and all that stuff. And I thought it was perfectly normal. And I think it still kind of is. But he was second generation off the boat Irish. And in our little cluster of where we lived, everyone's last name was McGill. He was McGill. Some were Magill, which I guess was some kind of conflict when they first got here about who was Protestant and who was Catholic, and somebody changed the last name. I don't understand all of it, but we lived in this little half-mile area of about 7 or 8 houses, and everyone's last name was McGill, except for us because my mother married my father's 100% Scottish. And so we were half Irish, half Scottish, but everybody else was just pure Irish, just red hair and potatoes. That is a thing. It's just, it's some stereotypes are true. My grandfather had a giant potato patch as well. It's just and that's just how I grew up. And turns out we had our own language. I didn't know that growing up, but still to this day, I say words that I think are normal people words, and they're not. People don't know what they mean. I guess it was some kind of old Irish. If you are a British person and want to use a more derogatory term, pikey words. Yeah, just weird old Northern Irish stuff that I didn't know. For example, the one I can think of right now is pantod. Pantod means some sort of fit. So in a sentence, my mother would say, "Don't have a pantod," if I was upset about something. That's not a word that people use. I didn't know that. But that's how I grew up, and it was pretty great. And my grandfather lived right next door to us. It was our house, a row of trees with a path through it, and their house. I'm not going to talk about my grandmother too much because I feel bad, but I don't remember her that much. She died a few years before he did. And I was just too young, and I just don't remember a lot about her. I remember I really liked her, and I remember she made amazing like sauce and stuff, but I don't remember a whole lot else about her, which I feel awful about. But because Walt definitely, I'm going to refer to him as Walt instead of Grandpa in this because it just sounds better. But Walt definitely loved her a lot, even though they did fight like crazy. So they would take care of us during the summer, my sister and I, because my parents worked full time. So we would just go to Grandma and Grandpa's house in the morning, and they would fight like cats and dogs. Like I knew they loved each other, but like I learned how to swear from listening to those fights. Absolutely, for sure. I remember there was a couple of really bad ones. I think the one that's the easiest to tell the story of, I guess, is we were sitting at their little small, they had a big like dining room, but we usually ate at like this little, I guess nowadays you'd call the breakfast nook, but this little table like in the kitchen, and my sister and I are sitting there, and they were fighting about something, just yelling and screaming at each other, and we're just trying to eat. And my grandfather just decided he had enough and he was going to leave, and go outside and do whatever, all kinds of cool old man stuff that he did. And he got up and just walked by her and grabbed her iced tea and threw it in her face and just kept walking, like didn't break stride. And she just wiped her face off with a napkin and went back to eating like nothing had ever happened. That's just kind of how their relationship was. In retrospect, it was hilarious. At the time, it was terrifying, but nobody ever got hurt. Nobody ever got bruised up or anything like that. They would just yell and throw things occasionally, and just how it was. It was the early 1980s, and they were really old school Irish people, and that's just what happened. I don't ever remember him working. I know he did work for the Erie Railroad. That's why he didn't have to go to World War II or anything like that. And I know that it was real like work. It wasn't just, he wasn't like sitting in an office for the Erie Railroad. He wasn't even driving a train. He was like laying tracks and stuff like that. Like he was a tough old dude, about 6'3", fiery red hair, and just the toughest looking guy. He had that look, like, this is when he was younger, obviously, but he just has that look about him, like he cannot be harmed by conventional weapons. He wasn't like super like muscly or anything, but he also looked like the kind of guy that if you smacked him upside the head with a 2x4, he would take that 2x4 from you and pound you into pulp and then ask, why did you do that? And he wasn't like a mean guy. He just was, he just had an air of like, do not mess with him. He was actually a hilarious guy when he wanted to be. I remember one of my favorite stories of him is I was about 8, 9, 10, something like that. And maybe even a little younger. And I was at their house, and this is in the 80s, and the Jehovah's Witnesses knocked on the door. And we lived in the boonies. They didn't get out there very often, but they did. They came out and knocked on the door, and they were trying to give him a copy of, their little magazine they hand out. This dude, like, we lived like next door to a church. I don't remember him ever setting foot in it. He was not like a religious guy at all. And they knocked on the door and tried to give him a copy of this magazine. And he just said, I can't read. He could totally read. He was fine. And they said, well, we'd love to come in and read it to you. And he said, I can't hear either, and slammed the door. And I remember even at that age, just laughing, just knowing like that was, we would call now trolling. Like that was awesome. Like that was just so funny. And that's just how he was. And he just was so tough. And I remember we would go out in his little garage that he had there. Not that little. It was actually a pretty impressive garage by now. Like, I'd love to have that garage. But he had an anvil, as you do back then, as one does. And he had an anvil, and he was pounding on something, a piece of metal. I think he was fixing a fender on his rototiller that he built himself, without plans or anything. He had that big giant potato patch out back, and he needed a bigger rototiller than he could actually buy. So he just built one, bought a motor and welded up some steel and made this, like, it was like a 7-foot long rototiller. The thing was crazy, like a walk behind self-propelled thing. But I think he was fixing a fender on that or something. He banged up, and he's pounding on this anvil with one of those little, like, 1.5-pound, 2-pound sledgehammers. And he's just wailing on this metal, like shaping it around. And he hit the back of his hand. And he hit it so hard, it wasn't even like it didn't sound like he hit himself. It just went tink, like he hit the metal. And he threw the hammer behind him, and walked out and I was a little kid. I was mortified. I just stayed out there paralyzed for a couple minutes, wondering if Grandpa's okay. And then I started playing around in the trees again and stuff and forgot about it. And then he came out like a couple hours later with a handkerchief wrapped around his hand and just didn't use that hand for like a month. And then was fine. But for the rest of his life, on the back of his hand, he had about a quarter-sized, perfectly round chunk of calcified crushed bone that was just there now. But his hand still worked, so he didn't care. He didn't do anything about it. Never went to a doctor, never nothing. Just, yeah, guess I got this now. Like, that's just kind of how he was. Broke his collarbone once, didn't do anything about it until about 6 weeks later. He ran into his doctor on the street in Canisteo in one of his few supply runs to the city. And the city, the town of the 2,000 people, and he ran into his doctor and said, I think I messed up my shoulder or something. And he goes, like, you broke your collarbone, you damn fool. Like, when did you do that? And he goes, I don't know, a month and a half ago. And he was like, well, I can't do anything about it now. Like, that's just how Grandpa was. He just was super tough. I remember I laughed so hard that like when we were one of the few moments I remember really laughing after he passed away. And I was pretty young. I was 13, so I was pretty devastated. And my mother and I were in his house to clear out his house. And this guy never wore anything except one outfit all the time. He had these like dark navy blue Dicey's brand shirts and pants, and like work shirt, work pants. He just wore those. That was it. There was a store in Canisteo that sold them. He would just go buy those. He had the same work boots. I can't remember what brand they were or anything. And occasionally like a leather fedora. But it was just that same outfit every day. Drove the same car as when I always knew Ford LTD. He'd buy a new one every few years, but Ford LTD. He'd just go down and he had a buddy that owned a car dealership, a Ford dealership in Bath, New York. He would just go buy a Ford LTD, whatever one they had on the lot. It might be a hideous color. He didn't care. He liked Ford LTDs, and he had a string of Ford LTDs, like as long as I can remember. And he was just like that. And we opened up his closet to clean stuff out, and there was just a rack of 6 of the identical outfit, the Dickies outfit, and a suit in case somebody died, I guess. And like that's just how he lived his life. And he just was a simple guy and a tough guy, and love him dearly. He was and always shall be my hero. And so I'm naming a knife after him. And oh my God, he would freak out about this. He always carried an Open L number 6. I remember because all his friends had Swiss Army knives and bucks and stuff, but he didn't. He wanted to be different. I don't know, but he just liked Open L number 6s. He always had those. I don't even know where he got them from back then. But he had those. But this wood, he loved the wood. And 01 tool steel. Oh my God, he would lose his mind over 01 tool steel. You know, and it was probably around back then. It's been around forever. But man, he would love this thing. And Grandpa, if you were around right now, you'd be very, very old. But if you were around, I'd just hand this to you, because I think you'd lose your mind over this thing. So yeah, miss you, Grandpa. Wanted to name something after you. My son's middle name is his middle name, but I thought that would just be. As soon as I picked it up, I'm like, old Walt would love this thing. So now, Tear Jerky story time is over. We'll move on to the actual review. So here we go on to the regular review of the Hinderer XM-24 Vintage. Named Walt from here on out. If you guys skipped ahead to watch this, you want to go back before, here's some cool stories about my grandpa. I highly encourage you to. Very interesting guy. I could have made that section an hour long, just telling awesome stories. I didn't even touch the surface of the cool stories about that dude. I want to write a book about him. I think I might actually do that. But yes, this is the XM-24 Vintage. I was looking for an XM-24, I mentioned, because I wanted to do a comparison video between this and the Spartan Harsey folder, which you'll see more because the Spartan Harsey folder is a bit bigger than an XM18, but still a bit smaller than an XM24. I didn't know which one to compare it to, and I just always wanted to try an XM24. I know they're supposed to be big giant beasts. I wanted to get one, and you guys pointed out Nick Shabazz's Discord server. I think I said Patreon earlier in this video, but I think you have to be on the Patreon to access the Discord, so potato. But yeah, kind of cool place to buy knives, actually. Some pretty cool deals out there. Got a wicked deal, couldn't pass it up. And these are still available. It is a limited run, but the XM24s are still available as of the time I'm putting this up on DLT Trading. They're $635. They are not inexpensive, but a regular XM24 is $595. So it's not that much more to get what I think just looks so much cooler. You have 01 tool steel, which you do not see very often in knives anymore. It is a very old school steel. It's known to be very, very tough. Edge retention is kind of moderate, I guess you'd call it. It is not even remotely corrosion resistant, but this one is coated with it appears to be the battle black finish. I've never actually had a battle black of all the Hinderers that I've had, but I think that's the battle black finish. It is the battle green on the lock side. You have all this bronze hardware, even the pivot, even the thumb studs, everything is all bronzed out. And I know it's hand bronzed because you can see, and I don't care, it just adds character to it. But yeah, one of my standoffs doesn't quite match the others. It doesn't bother me a tiny little bit. But it is serial numbered and all that stuff. It is still running on the tri-way pivot, so you can run it with ball bearings, with phosphor bronze washers, with whatever your little heart may desire. And of course, the walnut wood scale, which is super pretty. I do really like it. It did come, by the way, with this Shepherd CC carbon fiber scale on it. I swapped it back to the standard one. I think it fits the personality of the knife much better. If somebody wants this, hit me up, sliceydicy75@gmail.com, and I'll give you a price. I'm going to regret doing that because this video is going to live forever, and I'm going to be getting emails in 2027 from people asking if that scale is still available. If you're watching this in 2027, it is not. Just let you know that. But this is a big, giant bruiser of a knife. I don't think it's as big of a bruiser as people make it out to be. We'll get to that as we go on with this review. But some people say, oh, it's really great, but it's not really EDC-able. I completely disagree with those people. Metal Complex, yes, well, he doesn't carry it. What's up with that? He says it's too big. It's not too big. It's fine. We'll get to that as we go on. But let's do some specs and some size comparisons before we go too much farther here. We have an overall length of 9.125 inches, a blade length of 4 inches, blade thickness of 0.185 inches, handle thickness, pretty thick, 0.58 inches, and a weight of 7.2 ounces, which they even claim 7.8, but it's actually, according to my scale, 7.2. And is that light? No. Is it in my carryable range? It wasn't a year and a half ago, but it is now. I've been carrying this thing the last few days, and you know what? It's not bad. It's really not bad. We'll get to that more as we go on. Let's do some size comparisons. So we are not going to do our usuals because it's pointless because this is pretty big. So we're still going to do 2 Spydercos, but not the PM2 and the Para 3. So we have the Spyderco Shaman, known to be pretty big for a Spyderco, and the Spyderco Canis. I should have known I'd have to move stuff around on this. So you can see it's not dramatically longer than a Canis. A little bit, but it's not dramatically so. And then, of course, we're talking about big knives. We got to bring out some cold steels, right? So let's bring out, first of all, the Cold Steel 8010. Also one of my favorite larger knives. And the iconic Recon 1. So it would be a Tanto version. But yeah, it's about the same length as a Recon 1. And just a little bit longer than an 8010. So not too crazy there. And then I'll bring out one last one just because I like any excuse to bring out this big ridiculous sucker that just makes me smile every time I handle it. The Formax Scout. It's just a bit shorter than a Formax. I don't know if the angle's going to show that very well, but it's just a little bit shorter than a Formax. And then lastly, bring out some pricier stuff, because if you're looking at one of these, you probably are looking at spending some money. I have a couple XM18s. This is just the example that I chose. It happens to be a Warncliffe one, but the dimensions are all the same. This is a 3.5-inch XM18. And the knife that I really want to compare this to, this is a Spartan Harsey folder. So you can see why I was conflicted, because if you look at these, we'll do them this way. The Harsey is bigger than an XM18, but not quite as big as a 24. So there's probably going to be some kind of crazy three-way battle. This won't be the XM18 I use for it, but and I'll probably put the Hinderers on bronze washers, or at least one of them, just to even it out, because the Harsey runs on bronze washers. But you can see I still think it's closer in size. I think the Harsey's closer in size to a 24 than an 18. So that was why I initially started saying I was looking for a deal on an XM24. But how is this knife to actually use? Not bad. Like I said, some people say that it's really not anything that a normal person can EDC. I kind of disagree with it, but I am a guy who does occasionally carry a Formax Scout around all day. So take that with a grain of salt. Take that with what you will. But I don't carry a Formax Scout like out of my house on a hike very often. But I've actually been able to use this and enjoy it. It's 25 thousandths behind the edge, so not too bad. Yes, blade stock, very, very thick, 0.185. Is it a slicing machine, as I say? Absolutely not. But it is very sharp out of the box. It still cuts things fine. I actually just used it this morning for I'm wearing. You saw it in the thing earlier. I don't know if it showed what I was wearing, but it's a Knife Nuts Podcast t-shirt. Go check out Knife Nuts Podcast, by the way. Awesome. And I didn't like the tag in it. I used this to cut like the tag out of that, and it was fine. It can do little small stuff like that. It's sharp enough to do things like that. As far as like piercing goes, yeah, you're fine. If you want to do stupid stuff with this blade, you knock yourself out. I normally say don't pry on stuff with a blade. It's a really bad idea. It still is a really bad idea, but if you must, as the Ferris Bueller phrase goes, if you have the means, yeah, you could probably do that with this. 01 tool steel, super tough stuff, and just look at the tip on that sucker. It's going to be fine. I really like the blade on it. This is the what do they call this one? I can never remember. The spear point blade. It looks like a slicer. I always get them confused in pictures if it's a slicer or a spear point. This is a spear point. But yeah, it will pierce anything you want it to pierce, whether it be, a beer can if you're trying to shotgun a beer, or a can of beans if you're somehow broken living in an alley, but you have an XM24, or that guy in his white BMW that parks in front of your driveway every morning and leaves parks just right to where you can't quite get him a ticket, but you can't quite get in and out of your driveway, and maybe you want to stab a hole in his car door. This would do that. I'm just, so I've heard. I'm just talking. But yeah, really, really great blade on this. It is definitely very heavy duty. Yeah, you're not going to want to use this to go to, very minor tasks or anything, but I don't think anything about this knife indicates that. Ergonomics are great. It's huge. So yes, do I fit all four fingers? Yes. If I was a 7-fingered freak, I would still fit all four fingers on this. If I was Inigo Montoya, I would be able to, no, the guy on Inigo Montoya was after. There we go. Oh, whose name escapes me. I'm a terrible Princess Bride fan. The guy who Inigo Montoya was after, the 6-fingered man, I would be able to fit all of my fingers on here. It is very comfortable. The jimping is still an XM series, just like an XM18. It's the jimping is a bit jimp-tastic, but on this it bothers me a lot less. And one of the things on flipper tab XMs that always bothers me and bothers lots of people is your fingers land on that jimping. On the 24, you don't. You can see your finger lands way back here, so it's not at all a problem. Very generous finger choil. Anybody's fingers are going to fit in that. Ergos are just outstanding, and that nice big old thick handle. Great. Now, everybody's saying, like, what is you can't carry it though. Like I said, people have said that. No, you totally can. Here are Yale Levi's. This is a regular pair of Levi's, nothing big. As always with Hinderers, pocket clip tension is perfect. Nothing to worry about there. Does it take up a lot of real estate in the pocket? Yeah, it does, but it's not that bad. Flipper tab does stick out a whole lot. I'm going to give you that. You probably don't want to put anything in here, not because you don't have room, but because it's going to get banged up with that little, as Shabazz would say, pocket pecker sticking out. But I can still get my hands in and out of there just fine. I've been carrying this the last few days. It doesn't really bother me. We'll peel the pants back here and show you. It's not that horrible. It really isn't. Something like a Mannix 2 is just as wide in the pocket. It more so, I would say. The Shaman feels about the same in the pocket. This is heavier for sure. 7.2 ounces ain't light. Wear a belt, or don't wear basketball shorts for sure. You're gonna pants yourself in front of somebody you didn't want to pants yourself in front of. Don't pants yourself in front of people. Just don't do that. Full stop. Let's just say that. But yeah, it's not that horrible to carry. Is it something I would carry every day? Absolutely not. But is it something that like I hesitate to carry? Not really. And I was really expecting, from all the warnings I got from people, to just be this brick that I was gonna go, oh cool, and then sell it. And I don't think I am. I mean, I named it. I think it's gonna be around for a while. Action. It's, kind of the usual try-away, except I will say I was also warned that XM24s have really stiff detents. This one didn't. I actually took it apart to swap the scale back, and I actually tightened it up a little bit. I actually bent the lock bar in just a tick, because out of the box it wasn't so loose I could shake it out or anything, but I just wanted a bit more detent, and now it's like it's perfect, and a little bit of lube and as drop shutty as can be, as you'd expect with a blade that weighs this much. If it isn't drop shutty, there's something wrong. It's great, and thumb studs too, when I don't slip off with my stupid dry fingers. It works really good. I much prefer the flipper tab on this. Pushing off the thumb studs, you have to put a little bit more effort in, but it's not dramatic. So my overall impressions are, I think this is a lot more usable than people give it credit for. And I can't believe I'm saying that, because if you go back and watch my channel from a year and a half ago, I was all into 3-inch knives and all that stuff. And still love them. I still carry a lot of them. But if you are a big knife kind of guy, yeah, this is pretty good. In the smaller Hinderers, I guess you can call them small, the mid-size Hinderers, I say I prefer the Jurassic, to the XM18. I might even go now Jurassic XM24 XM18 in my preference ladder, even though I have more XM18s and I love some of my XM18s. I'm really liking the size of this, and maybe the honeymoon will wear off and I'll start liking the XM18 more again. But this is pretty great. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. And again, if you skipped ahead, please go back and watch stories about my grandfather. It's fun. I don't get teary or anything. I just tell funny stories about my grandfather. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I've been Brian. Have a good one.